April 12, 1952. 2:47 a.m. The rain hit 135th Street like bullets on tin. Bumpy Johnson stood outside the Red Rooster Club with his hands in his pockets, watching two squad cars pull up with their lights off. No sirens. No announcement. Just the slow roll of tires through standing water and the click of doors opening in the dark. Detective Russo stepped out first. Italian. Mid-40s. The kind of cop who'd learned to survive Harlem by knowing when to look the other way and when to make an example. Tonight, he wasn't looking away. "Bumpy Johnson," Russo said, loud enough for the street to hear. "You're under arrest for the murder of Vincent Albano." Vincent Albano. A mid-level enforcer for the Genovese family. Found 3 nights ago in an alley off Lenox Avenue with 2 bullets in his chest and his wallet still in his pocket. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. And now the message had an address. Bumpy didn't move. Didn't flinch. He just stared at Russo with that calm, unreadable expression he'd perfected over 20 years of surviving a world that wanted him dead or in chains. "You got a warrant, detective?" Russo pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Signed by Judge Callahan this afternoon. You want to read it, or you want to do this the easy way?" Behind Bumpy, the door to the Red Rooster opened. 3 men stepped out. Malcolm Reed, Jerome "Slim" Carter, and a young runner named Lewis who couldn't have been more than 19. They didn't say anything. They just stood there, waiting for Bumpy to give the word. One word, and this street would explode. Russo's hand moved toward his holster. Not drawing. Just hovering. The rain kept falling. Bumpy looked at Malcolm. Then at Slim. Then at Lewis, whose hand was already inside his jacket. He shook his head once. Barely noticeable. But enough. Lewis pulled his hand back out. Empty. Bumpy turned to Russo. "I'll come quietly." Russo blinked. He'd expected resistance. Maybe even hoped for it. An excuse to escalate. Instead, he got compliance. The kind of compliance that felt wrong. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Bumpy did. The cuffs went on without a fight. Russo walked him toward the squad car, and that's when Bumpy leaned in close. Close enough that only Russo could hear. He whispered something. 6 words. Russo's face went pale. His grip on Bumpy's arm loosened for just a second before he tightened it again and shoved him into the back seat. No one on the street heard what Bumpy said. But everyone saw Russo's reaction. The detective slammed the door, climbed into the driver's seat, and the squad cars pulled away into the rain. Malcolm stood on the sidewalk, watching the taillights disappear. "What the hell just happened?" Lewis asked. Malcolm didn't answer. Because he didn't know. But he knew one thing: Bumpy Johnson didn't get arrested without a reason. And he sure as hell didn't whisper to a cop unless that whisper was a weapon. 3 blocks away, in a 3rd-floor walk-up above a butcher shop, a man named Raymond Cole sat at his kitchen table with a gun in front of him. Raymond was 32. Thin build. Nervous hands. He'd been running numbers for Bumpy's operation for 6 years, ever since he got out of Rikers and needed work that didn't ask questions about his record. The job paid well. Kept his mother in her apartment. Kept his daughter in school. But tonight, Raymond wasn't thinking about the money. He was thinking about the envelope. It had arrived 2 days ago. No return address. Just his name written in block letters and a single sheet of paper inside with a time, a date, and a phone number. And a photograph. The photograph showed Raymond outside a police precinct on 128th Street, talking to a white man in a suit. The angle was tight, but clear enough. Clear enough to end him. Raymond had never been inside that precinct. He'd never talked to that man. But the photograph didn't care about the truth. It cared about what it looked like. And it looked like betrayal. His mother was asleep in the next room. She had diabetes. The medication cost more than Raymond made in a month, even with Bumpy's work. He'd been borrowing. Making promises. Falling behind. 2 weeks ago, a man had shown up at the butcher shop downstairs. Not one of Bumpy's people. Someone else. Someone who wore a tailored coat and spoke with a calm, measured voice that made Raymond's stomach turn. "You owe money to the wrong people, Raymond," the man had said. "But we can make that disappear. All of it. Your mother's bills. Your daughter's tuition. Everything. What do you want? Information. Names. Schedules. Where Bumpy moves his product. Who he meets. When he's vulnerable." Raymond had said no. Walked away. Told himself he'd figure something else out. Then the envelope arrived. And now Bumpy was in custody. Raymond stared at the gun. A snub-nose .38 he'd bought off a man in Brooklyn 3 years ago and never fired. He didn't even know if it still worked. The phone rang. Raymond froze. It rang again. Sharp. Insistent. He picked it up. "Mr. Cole." The same calm voice from 2 weeks ago. "I assume you've heard the news." "I didn't do anything." "I know. But that photograph says otherwise. And right now, Malcolm Reed is asking questions. Trying to figure out who talked. How the police knew where Bumpy would be tonight. How they knew about Vincent Albano." Raymond's throat tightened. "I don't know anything about Albano." "Of course you don't. But Malcolm doesn't know that. And when he comes looking, do you think he'll ask politely? Do you think he'll believe you?" Silence. "There's a car outside your building," the voice continued. "Black Cadillac. The driver has an envelope with $10,000 in cash. Enough to clear your debts. Enough to disappear for a while. All you have to do is walk downstairs and get in. And if I don't, then Malcolm will be at your door by sunrise. And he won't come alone." The line went dead. Raymond sat there, gripping the phone. His hand shook. His mother coughed in the next room, a wet, rattling sound that made his chest ache. He looked at the gun again. Then he stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked to the door. He didn't take the gun. He should have. Malcolm Reed didn't sleep. By 4 a.m., he'd already pulled together 5 of Bumpy's most trusted runners and sent them out across Harlem with one question. Who talked? Bumpy getting arrested wasn't the problem. Bumpy had been arrested before. He'd walk out in 72 hours with a smile and a lawyer who knew which palms to grease. But the timing was wrong. Vincent Albano's murder had been clean. No witnesses. No evidence. The body was found in an alley that didn't have eyes on it, at a time when the streets were empty. Whoever killed Albano knew what they were doing. And yet, somehow, the police had Bumpy's name within 72 hours. That didn't happen by accident. Malcolm stood in the back office of the Red Rooster, running through a list of names. People who'd been close to Bumpy in the last 2 weeks. People who knew his schedule. People who might have seen something. Raymond Cole's name was on that list. Malcolm didn't want to believe it. Raymond had been solid for 6 years. Never missed a payment. Never asked questions. Kept his head down and did the work. But Malcolm had learned a long time ago that solid didn't mean loyal. Solid just meant scared. And scared men broke when the pressure got too high. He picked up the phone and dialed Raymond's number. It rang. And rang. No answer. Malcolm hung up and looked at Slim, who stood by the door with his arms crossed. "Get over to Raymond's place," Malcolm said. "Don't knock. Just watch. See if he's running." Slim nodded and left without a word. Raymond was already 3 blocks away. The black Cadillac sat at the corner of 131st and 7th Avenue, engine running, headlights off. Raymond approached it slowly, his breath fogging in the cold pre-dawn air. The back door opened. A man sat inside. Not the one who'd visited the butcher shop. Someone older. Gray hair. Expensive suit. He gestured to the seat beside him. "Get in, Mr. Cole." Raymond hesitated. Every instinct told him to run. But where? Malcolm would find him. Malcolm always found people. He got in. The door closed behind him, and the car pulled away from the curb. The man handed Raymond a thick envelope. 10,000. Count it if you want. Raymond didn't count it. He just stared at it like it was a live grenade. What happens now? Now, you disappear for a few weeks. Maybe a month. Let things settle. By the time you come back, Bumpy will be in prison, and Malcolm Reed will have bigger problems than you. Bumpy's not going to prison. The man smiled. You'd be surprised what a jury believes when the right evidence is presented. Raymond's stomach turned. What evidence? The kind that puts a man at a crime scene. A witness who saw Bumpy arguing with Vincent Albano 2 hours before Albano was found dead. A weapon recovered from a location tied to Bumpy's operation. That's a setup. Of course it is. But it's a good one. Raymond looked out the window. They were heading south, away from Harlem. Away from everything he knew. Why me? Raymond asked. Why not just kill Bumpy and be done with it? The man leaned back in his seat. Because killing Bumpy makes him a martyr. Harlem rallies around martyrs. But putting him in prison? That makes him a failure. It breaks the myth. And once the myth is broken, Harlem moves on. Raymond felt sick. You did the right thing, the man said. Your mother will get her medication. Your daughter will finish school. You'll have a life. I didn't do anything. Exactly. You didn't do anything. You stayed quiet. You took the money. You survived. That's all anyone can ask. The car turned onto a side street and stopped in front of a small motel. Room 12, the man said. Stay there until we call you. Don't contact anyone. Don't go back to your apartment. Don't do anything stupid. Raymond took the envelope and got out. The Cadillac drove away, and Raymond stood in the empty parking lot, holding $10,000 that felt like a death sentence. Back at the Red Rooster, Slim returned. "Raymond's gone," Slim said. "Neighbors saw him leave around 4. Didn't take anything with him. Just walked out." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Find him." Raymond lasted 18 hours in that motel room. 18 hours of staring at the ceiling, listening to sirens in the distance, and wondering if every footstep in the hallway was Malcolm coming to put a bullet in his head. He thought about his mother. About his daughter. About how the $10,000 sitting in the envelope on the dresser could change everything or mean nothing at all, depending on whether he lived long enough to use it. At 9 p.m., he couldn't take it anymore. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago but never used. It rang twice. "Yeah." Malcolm's voice. Raymond's hand shook. "It's me." Silence on the other end. Long enough that Raymond thought Malcolm might have hung up. Then, "Where are you?" "Doesn't matter. I need you to listen." "I'm listening." Raymond took a breath. "I didn't set up Bumpy. I swear on my daughter's life, I didn't. But someone's trying to make it look like I did." "Who?" "I don't know. Some guy in a suit. He came to me 2 weeks ago, said he'd clear my debts if I gave him information on Bumpy. I told him no. Then I got an envelope with a photograph, me outside a precinct, talking to a cop. I've never been to that precinct. I've never talked to that cop. But the photo looks real." Malcolm didn't respond. "They called me after Bumpy got arrested," Raymond continued. "Told me if I didn't take their money and disappear, you'd come for me. So I ran. But I'm not a rat, Malcolm. I swear to God, I'm not." "Then why'd you run?" "Because I was scared. Because I knew how it looked. Because I didn't think you'd believe me." More silence. "Where are you?" Malcolm asked again. Raymond hesitated. Then he gave Malcolm the address. "Stay there," Malcolm said. "I'm coming." The line went dead. Raymond sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the phone. He didn't know if he'd just saved his life or ended it. Malcolm arrived 40 minutes later. He knocked once. Raymond opened the door, and Malcolm walked in without a word. He looked around the room. Saw the envelope on the dresser. Walked over and opened it. Cash. Crisp bills. 10s and 20s, bundled tight. "How much?" Malcolm asked. 10,000. Malcolm closed the envelope and tossed it back on the dresser. Then he turned to Raymond. "Tell me everything." Raymond did. The debt. The man in the suit. The photograph. The phone call. The Cadillac. All of it. When he finished, Malcolm sat down in the chair by the window and stared at the floor. "You should have come to me," Malcolm said. "Soon as that man showed up, you should have come to me." "I know. You think Bumpy wouldn't have helped you? You think he'd let your mother go without medication? I didn't want to be a burden." Malcolm looked up. "You think this is better?" Raymond didn't answer. Malcolm stood and walked to the door. Then he stopped. "That photograph," Malcolm said. "You said it showed you outside a precinct." "Yeah." "Which precinct?" "The one on 128th. Malcolm's face changed. Something clicked. That's not a precinct, Malcolm said slowly. That's a federal building. Raymond blinked. What? The 128th Street building. It used to be a precinct, but the feds took it over last year. It's DA now. Narcotics. Organized crime. Raymond's stomach dropped. Malcolm turned back to him. This isn't about Bumpy getting arrested for killing Vincent Albano. This is bigger. The feds don't care about one dead enforcer. They care about taking down networks. Families. Operations. I don't understand. Someone's building a case, Malcolm said. Not against Bumpy. Against everyone. The Italians. Us. Whoever killed Albano. They're setting up a chain reaction. And they're using you to do it. Raymond felt cold. The photograph, Malcolm continued. The money. The motel. They don't need you to talk. They just need you to run. To look guilty. To make me think you're the leak. And while I'm chasing you, they're putting the real pieces in place. Who? Malcolm pulled out a cigarette and lit it. His hand was steady, but his eyes were sharp. Bumpy whispered something to that detective, Malcolm said. Right before they put him in the car. I saw Russo's face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. What did Bumpy say? Malcolm took a drag. I don't know. But I'm starting to think Bumpy knew this was coming. And whatever he whispered wasn't a threat. He looked at Raymond. It was a warning. At the 7th precinct, Detective Frank Russo sat in an interrogation room across from Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy hadn't said a word since they brought him in. Just sat there, calm as Sunday morning, with his hands folded on the table. Russo leaned forward. You want to tell me why you killed Vincent Albano? Bumpy smiled. I didn't. We have a witness who says otherwise. Then your witness is lying. Russo slid a photograph across the table. It showed Bumpy standing outside a warehouse on Lenox Avenue. Talking to Vincent Albano. The timestamp read April 9th, 1952. 11:47 p.m. 3 hours before Albano was found dead. That's you, Russo said. That's Albano. That's motive. Bumpy looked at the photograph. Then he looked at Russo. Who gave you this? Russo didn't answer. Bumpy leaned back. You're being played, detective. And if you're smart, you'll figure that out before it's too late. Is that a threat? No, Bumpy said. It's advice. Russo's jaw tightened. What did you whisper to me? Outside the club. Bumpy's smile widened. I said, check your partner's bank account. Russo's face went pale. Detective Frank Russo didn't go home that night. Instead, he sat in his car outside the precinct, smoking cigarettes and staring at the dashboard like it held answers. Check your partner's bank account. His partner was Michael Driscoll. 28 years old. 5 years on the force. Clean record. Ambitious. The kind of cop who wanted to make detective before 30 and didn't care who he had to step on to get there. They'd been paired together for 8 months. Russo had never questioned Driscoll's methods. Never looked too closely at how he always seemed to know which raids would turn up product, which informants would deliver, which busts would stick. But now, sitting in the dark with Bumpy's words echoing in his head, Russo realized he'd been willfully blind. He started the car and drove to the records office. By 6 a.m., Russo had what he needed. Bank statements. Deposit records. A paper trail that showed Michael Driscoll had received 4 separate wire transfers over the last 3 months. $10,000 each. From a shell company registered in Delaware with ties to a law firm that represented the Genovese family. $40,000. Russo sat in the empty records room, staring at the documents spread across the desk. Driscoll wasn't just dirty. He was coordinated. Professional. He'd been feeding information to the mob for months. And the Vincent Albano murder wasn't justice. It was cleanup. Albano had been skimming. The family knew it. But they couldn't just kill him without drawing heat. So they set up Bumpy Johnson to take the fall. A photograph. A witness. A case built on fabricated evidence that would send Bumpy to prison and eliminate Albano in one move. And Driscoll had made it happen. Russo's hands shook as he gathered the documents. He thought about confronting Driscoll. Arresting him. Bringing this to internal affairs. Then he thought about his mortgage. His daughter's wedding next spring. The promotion he'd been promised if this case closed clean. He thought about what would happen if he went public with this. The investigation. The scrutiny. The questions about how he didn't notice his own partner was corrupt. Russo lit another cigarette. Then he picked up the phone and called a number he'd kept in his wallet for 2 years. A number he swore he'd never use. It rang 3 times. Yeah. A gravelly voice. It's Russo. I need to talk to Bumpy. Raymond Cole never made it out of that motel. At 7:15 a.m., 2 men in dark suits knocked on his door. Not Malcolm's people. Not the police. Federal agents. Raymond opened the door, and they showed him their badges. Raymond Cole, you're being taken into protective custody. For what? Material witness in a federal investigation into organized crime activities involving Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, the Genovese crime family, and corrupt law enforcement. Raymond's mind raced. I didn't witness anything. You were photographed outside a federal building. You accepted $10,000 from an individual tied to an ongoing investigation. And your phone records show contact with known associates of Mr. Johnson. That's not. Mr. Cole, you have 2 options. You cooperate with us, testify when we need you, and we'll relocate you and your family under witness protection. Or you refuse, and we charge you as an accessory to murder, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. Raymond looked past them. Down the hallway. No one else was there. No Malcolm. No backup. No escape. What about my mother? Raymond asked quietly. She'll be moved to a facility in Pennsylvania. Full medical care. No cost to you. My daughter? New school. New name. New life. Raymond thought about the $10,000 on the dresser. The money that was supposed to save him. The money that had destroyed him instead. What do you need me to say? The agent stepped inside and closed the door. Malcolm found the motel room empty 20 minutes later. No Raymond. No envelope. No sign of struggle. Just a phone off the hook and a cigarette still burning in the ashtray. Malcolm stood in the doorway, staring at the empty room, and felt the pieces fall into place. They'd gotten to Raymond first, And if they had Raymond, they had everything. He pulled out his gun, checked the clip, and walked back to his car. There was only one move left. Get to Bumpy before the feds did. By noon, Harlem knew something was wrong. Word spread fast in the streets. Bumpy Johnson was still in custody. Raymond Cole had vanished. Malcolm Reed was moving through the neighborhood with a look that made even the hardest men step aside. The Red Rooster stayed closed. The numbers runners went quiet. The usual flow of money and information that kept Bumpy's operation running smoothly had frozen solid. People who'd been loyal for years started asking questions. Quietly. Carefully. Questions about what happens when the man at the top disappears. Questions about who takes over. Questions about whether it was time to make other arrangements. At a barber shop on 145th Street, two men who'd worked for Bumpy since the 40s sat in adjacent chairs, not getting haircuts, just talking in low voices. "Malcolm's scrambling," one said. "You can see it. He's trying to hold things together, but he doesn't have Bumpy's weight." "Nobody does," the other replied. "That's the problem." Across the street, a young dealer named Antoine watched the barber shop through a diner window. He'd been waiting for this. An opening. A crack in the structure. He had backers from Brooklyn who'd been wanting a piece of Harlem for 2 years, and now the door was finally open. He made a phone call. By evening, 3 new operations had set up on corners that used to belong to Bumpy. Small moves. Testing the boundaries. Seeing if Malcolm would push back or if the empire was already crumbling. At the 7th precinct, Russo stood outside the holding cells. He brought the bank records. The deposit slips. Everything that proved Driscoll was dirty. But he hadn't filed them. Hadn't shown them to anyone. He stood there, holding the envelope, trying to decide if he was about to save his career or end it. The guard buzzed him through. Bumpy sat on the bench in his cell, reading a newspaper like he was in his own living room. "Detective," Bumpy said without looking up. "Took you long enough." Russo stopped in front of the bars. "You knew." "Of course I knew." "How long?" 2 months. Maybe 3. Bumpy folded the newspaper and set it aside. "Your partner's not as smart as he thinks. He got sloppy. Started spending before the job was done. New watch. New car. Little things that add up when you know what to look for." Russo felt hollow. "Why didn't you say something?" "To who?" "You? Internal Affairs? The feds?" Bumpy stood and walked to the bars. "You think anyone would have believed me? A black man in Harlem accusing a white cop of corruption? That's not how this works, detective. You know that." Russo looked down at the envelope in his hands. "So you let yourself get arrested?" "I let them think they won," Bumpy said. "There's a difference. Vincent Albano's still dead. Vincent Albano was dead the moment he started skimming from his own family. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or the right place, depending on how you look at it." Russo's jaw tightened. "The photograph. The witness. It's all fabricated." "I know. Then why not fight it?" Bumpy smiled. "Because fighting it keeps me in here. Accepting it gets me out." Russo didn't understand. "You're going to cut a deal," Bumpy continued. "You're going to take those bank records to your captain. You're going to tell him your partner's been working for the Genovese family. And you're going to offer me as bait. Bait for what? The feds don't want me, detective. They want the whole network. They want names. Connections. A case that takes down organized crime in New York. And I'm going to give it to them. Russo stared at him. You're going to cooperate? I'm going to survive, Bumpy said. Same way I always have. He turned and sat back down on the bench. Your partner sold you out the moment he took that first payment, Bumpy said. You can go down with him, or you can be the cop who brought him in. Your choice. Russo stood there for a long moment. Then he walked away without saying another word. Malcolm got the call at 9 p.m. It was Slim. His voice was tight. We got a problem. What kind? The kind that bleeds. Antoine and his Brooklyn crew just hit one of our spots on 140th. Took the product. Beat the hell out of Tommy. Left him in the street as a message. Malcolm's grip on the phone tightened. Where's Antoine now? Don't know. But word is he's got backing. Real backing. Not just Brooklyn street dealers. Somebody with money. Malcolm closed his eyes. This was it. The moment every empire feared. The second the foundation cracks and everyone rushes in to grab a piece before it collapses completely. Round up everyone we got, Malcolm said. We move tonight. Malcolm, if we go to war without Bumpy, we don't have a choice. Slim was quiet for a moment. Then, yeah. All right. The line went dead. Malcolm grabbed his coat and his gun. Harlem was about to burn. And Bumpy Johnson was still sitting in a cell, reading a newspaper, like none of it mattered. Bumpy Johnson walked out of the 7th Precinct at 6 a.m. on April 14th. No charges filed. No trial. No cameras. Just a quiet release through the back door while the city was still asleep. Detective Frank Russo had done exactly what Bumpy knew he would. He'd brought the bank records to his captain. Driscoll was arrested that same night. The case against Bumpy fell apart in less than 12 hours once the fabricated evidence was exposed. But Bumpy didn't go back to Harlem. He stood on the corner of 128th Street, watching the sun come up over the Federal Building, and made a phone call. It's done, he said. The voice on the other end was calm. Professional. Federal. You kept your end. We'll keep ours. Raymond Cole and his family? Relocated. New identities. Your mother receives full medical care for life. No one touches them. Bumpy closed his eyes. And Malcolm? He's not part of the agreement. He needs to be. Silence on the other end. Mr. Johnson, you gave us Driscoll. You gave us the Genovese connection. That was the deal. Malcolm Reed wasn't part of it. Then make him part of it, Bumpy said quietly. Or I walk back into Harlem right now and this whole thing falls apart. Another pause. 48 hours, the voice said. That's all we can give you. After that, Malcolm's on his own. The line went dead. Bumpy stood there, watching the street wake up. Thinking about Malcolm. About the war that was already starting. About the empire he'd built and the price of keeping it alive. He'd made a deal with the federal government. Not to save himself. but to dismantle the Italian families that had been squeezing Harlem for decades. In exchange, Bumpy stayed free. Raymond stayed safe. And the feds got the biggest organized crime case in New York history. But Malcolm didn't know. No one in Harlem knew. They thought Bumpy had just gotten lucky. That the charges fell apart because the cops were sloppy. They didn't know their king had sold the kingdom to save it. Bumpy walked 3 blocks south and disappeared into a car that had been waiting for him. By the time Malcolm realized what had happened, it would be too late. The whisper Bumpy gave to Detective Russo wasn't just about Driscoll's bank account. It was the first move in a game no one else knew they were playing. And Bumpy Johnson had already won. And if this story made you rethink everything you thought you knew about power, loyalty, and survival, hit that subscribe button. We're digging into the real stories behind the legends, the ones history tried to bury. Don't miss the next one.